Recently, Dalton Mayor Tiffany Henyard made headlines when the FBI handcuffed her amidst allegations of wire fraud, accusing her of using questionable tactics to finance a lavish lifestyle at the expense of the town's finances. At first glance, the situation seems absurd, but it's far from typical small-town drama. Henyard, once the shining star of Dalton, appeared to be living a Kardashian-esque lifestyle, indulging in luxury getaways, high-end luggage, and over-the-top security detail that likely cost more than most people's homes. Meanwhile, the town's bank account was draining rapidly and its debt was mounting, while Henyard's personal wealth and lifestyle grew without restraint as the story unfolded. It became clear that Henyard had turned Dalton's millions into a financial mess while living large on taxpayer dollars. The deeper the investigation, the more disturbing the picture became. How did a community that once boasted millions in the bank go from financial stability to being buried in debt? The FBI is closely watching, and Henyard has a lot to answer for. The saga began when Frank Zucchi's sudden passing left an unexpected vacancy in the mayor's office, and Henyard was sworn in. Many residents were initially skeptical about the last-minute appointment, but Henyard quickly made bold promises for Dalton's future, capturing the attention of the town. At first, it seemed like she might be a promising leader, bringing fresh ideas and excitement to the community. However, that honeymoon period was short-lived. As soon as public money became involved, things began to take a turn for the worse, and Henyard's handling of Dalton's finances quickly raised red flags. It wasn't just spending, it was reckless squandering. The town's funds dwindled rapidly, and Henyard's behavior suggested she saw herself as the ruler of her own tiny kingdom, rather than a responsible public official. Anyone who dared to oppose her was swiftly silenced. Those who questioned her lavish spending were dismissed, and her administration became increasingly divisive and hostile. The village board attempted to intervene and investigate the financial mismanagement, but Henyard would not tolerate it. She overrode any attempt to rein in her behavior, acting as though the town's money was her own personal ATM as Henyard continued to live in luxury. The people of Dalton watched in disbelief as their mayor flaunted an extravagant lifestyle, while the town's financial stability slipped away. Expensive vacations, designer clothes, and a security detail that cost more than most people's annual salaries became regular parts of Henyard's life. Despite the mounting debt and warnings from the community, she pushed forward with her lavish spending, confident she could outmaneuver any opposition. It wasn't long before the FBI took notice of Henyard's questionable actions, and an investigation began to unravel the full scope of the mayor's alleged fraud. What initially seemed like a promising leadership story for a small town turned into a nightmare of corruption, greed, and betrayal. Henyard, once seen as a celebrity-like figure in Dalton, transformed into the very definition of political scandal. Now, the town's residents are left grappling with the fallout of her actions with the FBI hot on her trail. Henyard faces serious questions about how she mismanaged Dalton's funds and whether her lavish lifestyle was funded by the very community she was supposed to serve. As more details emerge, it's clear that Henyard's time in office was not only divisive but deeply damaging to the financial well-being of the town she was meant to protect. The question remains, how will the people of Dalton recover from this? Meanwhile, another strange incident unfolded involving local government. The assessor for Thornton Township, who has served for the past 10 years and helps residents deal with property tax appeals and exemptions, arrived at work to find something unsettling. Upon arriving, she discovered she had been locked out of her own office. Worse, sensitive documents that had previously been secured in her office were scattered around the common area. These were meant to be under lock and key. The mystery deepens, raising more concerns about transparency and security within local government, adding to the growing sense of unease within the community.
What happened when you tried to open it?
Not only had Elston been locked out of her own office, but boxes of sensitive documents that she kept in her office were spread around the common area.
This was under lock and key before.
This was under lock and key.
And now it's just out in the open?
Now it's just out in the open. So it has taxpayer's name, address.
So who did this to you?
Well, I mentioned this new supervisor, Tiffany Henyard.
Brian and Natalie, it is very clear that the trustees in Thornton Township have trust issues, refusing to second a motion by Tiffany Henyard to get routine township bills paid.
Recently, the town of Dalton has found itself at the center of a political and financial scandal involving its once popular mayor, Tiffany Henyard. Henyard, who was initially celebrated for her bold promises and apparent charisma, has become embroiled in a web of financial mismanagement, alleged fraud, and extravagant spending that has left the small community reeling. As investigations intensify, Residents of Dalton are grappling with the fallout of Henyard's actions, and the entire town's future seems to hang in the balance. The scandal began when Henyard, who had only recently been appointed mayor following the unexpected death of her predecessor, Frank Zucchi, began to make waves with her handling of Dalton's finances. While many in the community initially hoped for fresh leadership, Henyard quickly squandered any goodwill as it became apparent that she was recklessly mismanaging the town's funds. Her actions grew more erratic, with reports of high-end vacations, designer shopping sprees, and even an extravagant security detail, costing more than the town's police department's entire budget. Meanwhile, Dalton's bank account was draining, and the town's debt was growing despite the mounting concerns. Henyard appeared confident that she could avoid scrutiny. However, as the bills piled up and the financial situation worsened, tensions began to rise. The town's trustees, who were responsible for overseeing the mayor's decisions, grew increasingly skeptical of Henyard's management. Her attempts to push through payments and financial decisions were met with fierce resistance. At a recent board meeting, Henyard's proposal to pay off the general fund bills was rejected outright, with the trustees refusing to budge. The situation reached a boiling point when, during a heated exchange at the meeting, Henyard attempted to get the board to approve payments, but the motion failed. Frustrated, she adjourned the meeting abruptly and stormed out. While Henyard's actions in Dalton were becoming more controversial, another equally troubling incident occurred in Thornton Township. Natalie Stone, the elected assessor for the township, arrived at work one morning only to discover that her office door wouldn't open. Upon further inspection, she found boxes of sensitive documents that had previously been locked away now scattered across the common area. These documents, which contained personal taxpayer information such as names and addresses, were no longer secure. This breach of confidentiality raised immediate questions about how it happened and whether it was an intentional act or simply a careless mistake. The new supervisor under whose authority Stone operated seemed to have no answers, and suspicions began to grow about possible connections to Henyard's chaotic leadership. Henyard, whose actions had been under growing scrutiny for months, was now facing questions about her leadership not just in Dalton, but also in surrounding areas like Thornton Township. Her controversial behavior had created a power struggle between her and the other members of the township's board. When Henyard attempted to push through certain financial decisions to keep the township's payments on track, she found herself met with even more resistance. Trustees repeatedly refused to cooperate with her and ignored her calls, leaving key issues unresolved. The tension reached its peak during a board meeting, where none of Henyard's proposals were even included on the agenda for discussion. The trustees had made it clear they were unwilling to cooperate, and the situation became increasingly adversarial. As Henyard tried to push her financial recommendations forward, she was confronted with skepticism and opposition. The mood grew more hostile, with Henyard becoming visibly frustrated as the meeting dragged on without any resolutions. Ultimately, the meeting ended in failure, with Henyard storming out after another failed attempt to convince the trustees to support her proposals. It was in the midst of this political turmoil that the situation in Dalton took a darker turn. The FBI began to investigate Henyard's actions, and what initially seemed like a local scandal quickly ballooned into something much larger. The town, once flush with millions in the bank, had become deeply in debt, now facing a staggering $3.5 million deficit. The FBI, armed with subpoenas and relentless determination, began to examine every aspect of Dalton's finances, from payroll to budgets, credit card statements, and expense reimbursements. The investigation soon revealed a troubling picture of financial mismanagement and possible fraud. With Henyard at the center of it all, Henyard's attempts to downplay the situation only added fuel to the fire. The federal government was not taking this lightly, and they began digging into her personal business dealings, including her restaurant and property management companies, as well as her financial ties to the town. Alongside this, they issued a second subpoena for the township's financial records, demanding everything from payroll records to budgets and expense reimbursements. The intensity of the investigation grew, and it became clear that the FBI was determined to uncover the full extent of Henyard's alleged wrongdoing. The investigation wasn't just limited to Henyard. The FBI began to focus on her inner circle, interviewing witnesses, speaking to local business owners, and tracking every penny that had passed through Dalton's coffers. One key figure under scrutiny was Keith Freeman, who appeared to be involved in some questionable financial dealings surrounding Henyard's leadership. The scope of the investigation widened, and it was becoming apparent that this was no ordinary probe. As former FBI agents weighed in, it became clear that the federal government was treating this case with the seriousness of a high-profile investigation, drawing comparisons to Watergate due to its complexity and potential fallout. Meanwhile, the FBI's efforts to uncover the full extent of Henyard's spending habits revealed an eye-popping list of extravagant purchases. Among the most notable was her personal security detail, which was costing the town more than some countries spend on their national defense budgets. Henyard, who was supposed to be leading a small town, seemed to view herself as royalty, living in a bubble of luxury while the town's residents struggled with growing financial burdens. As Henyard paraded around with her own private army, Dalton's police department remained underfunded. Unable to address real crime while the mayor lived in her lavish world of security, and excess Henyard spending didn't stop at her security detail. Investigations revealed she had been indulging in extravagant shopping sprees, including one infamous $33,000 Amazon shopping spree, where she purchased everything from wigs to batteries. While Dalton faced a mounting debt, Henyard seemed oblivious to the severity of the situation. She continued to live a life of luxury, spending recklessly while her town spiraled into financial ruin. The depth of Henyard's financial excesses began to shock even the most seasoned investigators. Her spending habits were becoming increasingly difficult to justify, and the town's residents were starting to take notice. Anger began to build among the people of Dalton, as they realized the full extent of what was happening behind closed doors. Henyard's reckless actions were no longer a secret, and the public outcry grew louder. It became clear that Henyard had not only squandered the town's resources, but had also betrayed the trust of the very people she was supposed to serve as the FBI continued its investigation. The town of Dalton's residents were left wondering how this could have happened. How could a town that had once been financially stable become buried under millions in debt? The answer seemed to lie in Henyard's complete disregard for fiscal responsibility and her obsession with living a life of luxury at the taxpayers' expense. For the people of Dalton, it was a bitter pill to swallow. The mayor they had once trusted had turned into the embodiment of political corruption, and the damage she had caused the town's financial stability was immeasurable. In an attempt to address the growing concerns, the Dalton Village Board enlisted the help of former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Lightfoot, a former federal prosecutor, was brought in to investigate Henyard's spending and financial decisions. Her appointment was not a coincidence. Lightfoot had a keen eye for financial mismanagement and was determined to get to the bottom of what had been happening in Dalton. As she began reviewing Henyard's credit card statements, travelogues, and spending records, the scope of the mayor's extravagance became even clearer, but Henyard wasn't going down without a fight. She attempted to frame the investigation as a political attack, suggesting that her gender and race were driving the scrutiny. She tried to play the victim while continuing to live a life of indulgence, seemingly oblivious to the mounting outrage among the town's residents. But the people of Dalton were no longer buying her excuses. They were fed up with watching their tax dollars disappear into Henyard's bottomless pit of luxury, and they demanded answers. At a recent village council meeting, residents pulled no punches, calling Henyard out for her reckless behavior and demanding that she take responsibility for the mess she had created. As the pressure mounted, it was clear that Henyard's time in office was running out. The FBI was closing in on her, and with every passing day, more of her extravagant spending and financial mismanagement came to light. The people of Dalton were determined to hold her accountable for the damage she had caused, and the clock was ticking on her political career for the residents of Dalton. The situation had become a political nightmare, one that had unfolded like a reality TV show with much higher stakes. As Henyard continued to dig herself deeper into a hole, the people were left to pick up the pieces of a town on the brink of collapse. The future of Dalton was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Henyard's actions had left an indelible mark on the town's financial history. Now, it was up to the people of Dalton and the federal authorities to ensure that justice was served.
Tiffany, there's one comment that I've heard out of your mouth that I actually agree with.
I wouldn't trust this woman as she stood on a stack of Bibles and had her tongue notarized. Not a damn thing she says comes out her mouth.
Amidst growing controversy, the financial chaos in Dalton has reached new heights as tensions between Tiffany Henyard, the mayor, and the town's leadership escalate. Henyard's extravagant spending habits and reckless financial decisions have not only left the town in a dire state, but have also drawn the scrutiny of both the FBI and the local community. The residents of Dalton are now questioning the integrity of their elected officials, and Henyard's actions have provoked widespread outrage. Local businessman Lawrence Gardner alleged that after refusing to contribute to Henyard's political campaign, he was harassed by the local police, which raised serious concerns about Henyard's control over law enforcement. As the mayor appears to have the police in her pocket, tensions continue to rise. The village board attempted to exert pressure by initiating a probe into Henyard's spending, but Henyard quickly shut down the effort, signaling that she was not willing to relinquish her lavish lifestyle. At the same time, residents of Dalton watch as their town deteriorates. The streets are in dire need of repair, infrastructure is crumbling, and basic services are at risk of being compromised. Local trustees are demanding financial transparency, urging the mayor to reveal where the town's money has gone. However, Illinois has had enough of this mess, and in response, the state has frozen funding to Dalton. A stark reminder how dire the situation has become. The financial crisis in Dalton is nothing short catastrophic, with the town now saddled with over $3.5 million in debt, a far cry from the millions it once had in the bank. Leadership within the town has become fragmented, with Henyard at the center of the controversy. She seems increasingly unstable, and the town's future remains uncertain. The village board and local residents are demanding accountability, but the question remains, what will happen to Dalton now that the Henyard empire is crumbling? The situation has become even more pressing as Henyard's behavior has drawn the attention of federal authorities. The FBI is sniffing around, and while Henyard might have initially brushed off the situation, the feds don't take these matters lightly. The scope of their investigation has broadened, and their scrutiny now extends beyond Henyard to her entire inner circle, including business dealings, payroll records, and financial reimbursements. Former FBI agents have hinted that this investigation is more serious than it appears. With a clear focus on uncovering the full extent of Henyard's alleged financial mismanagement, the lavish lifestyle Henyard has been leading, funded by taxpayer money, has shocked the public. Her excessive spending on luxury items such as designer purses, vacations, and a $33,000 Amazon shopping spree has fueled outrage, especially considering that Dalton is now drowning in debt. While the mayor enjoys these luxuries, the town's police department remains underfunded, and vital infrastructure needs attention. It's become clear that Henyard's priorities have been grossly misaligned with the needs of the community, in addition to her shopping sprees. Henyard has been spending taxpayer money on a costly security detail, further raising eyebrows. At a time when Dalton is struggling to pay its bills, the mayor has been living in a bubble of luxury while the town's residents are left to pick up the pieces. As the FBI digs deeper into her financial activities, more shocking revelations are likely to come to light to make matters worse. Former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot has been brought in by the Dalton Village Board to investigate Henyard's spending. Lightfoot, a former federal prosecutor, is known for a keen eye for financial mismanagement. She is carefully reviewing Henyard's credit card statements, spending logs, and travel records. What she's finding is deeply troubling. A pattern of excessive spending at the expense of Dalton's taxpayers. Henyard has tried to defend herself, claiming that the investigation is politically motivated and driven by her gender and race. However, the people of Dalton are no longer buying her excuses. The community is growing increasingly frustrated, demanding that Henyard step down and take responsibility for the financial disaster she has created. At a recent village council meeting, residents voiced their anger, calling for answers and accountability. The FBI's investigation into Henyard's activities is intensifying, and it's becoming clear that her time as mayor is running out. The federal government is scrutinizing every detail of her spending, and it seems that the full extent of her alleged misuse of public funds is just beginning to unfold. As the feds close in, Henyard's empire appears to be crumbling, and the people of Dalton are left to wonder if justice will ever be served. The fallout from Henyard's actions is likely to have long-term consequences for Dalton. Not only is the town facing a severe financial crisis, but the trust between the community and its leaders has been shattered. The next mayor will face an uphill battle to restore that trust and rebuild the town's finances. It's unclear whether Dalton can recover from this debacle, but one thing is certain. This scandal will continue to haunt the town for years to come. Henyard's fall from grace serves as a stark reminder of the importance of holding local officials accountable. While national politics often dominate the headlines, it's crucial to pay attention to what's happening in our own backyards. Local leaders have a direct impact on our communities, and when they misuse their power, the consequences can be devastating. As Dalton grapples with the aftermath of Henyard's actions, the town's residents are left to pick up the pieces. They are demanding that their leaders prioritize the needs of the community over personal gain. The people of Dalton deserve transparency, accountability, and a future free from the kind of financial mismanagement that has plagued their town. Henyard may have thought she could get away with it, but the residents of Dalton aren't backing down. They are taking to the streets, demanding answers, and fighting for the future of their town. As the FBI investigation unfolds, it's clear that Henyard's days as mayor are numbered. The people of Dalton are watching, and they won't rest until justice is served.